Good morning, friends. Hello, Geeta. Hello, Jens. Hello, Bradley. Hello, Ella. Hello, Cam. Hi, Dan. Hello, Kyle. Bit of emphasis. And good morning, Bante. He's our favorite monk. Just like I'm the favorite female monk, he's the favorite male monk because we're the only two monks in the room. So, hello, Edward. Hello, Belinda. We will be in this new episode of BNN. We will be studying the Anāthapiṇḍikovāda Sutta. Majjhima Nikaya 143, the exhortation to Anāthapiṇḍika. So you can find the link of the sutta at the top of the list and the top of the list of things on the live chat. You can click the link and you can find the text and read with us. And Belinda is saying, I decided this was more important than work this morning. Correct. Yes. It says the good work that leads to liberation. All right, so I'll shut up and I'll let Bante take it from here.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Good morning, friends, and welcome to more Sutta study. Are you excited? You should be excited. It's the Buddha's words. Of course, we should be excited. So this morning, as Ayasoma mentioned, we'll be looking at the Anāthapiṇḍikovāda Sutta, advice to Anāthapiṇḍika. So the translation here is exhortation to Anāthapiṇḍika, and I think that's a great example of an excessively fancy word when a simple one would be much better. Let me guess, you have this word in Italian. Esortazione.
Yes.
Great. See, it's so easy. You just take the most ridiculously long and complicated English words, and they're Italian. The esortazione all'Anāthapiṇḍika or something like that.
L'esortazione ad Anāthapiṇḍika.
See, there you go. It sounds basically the same in Italian. Anyway, so advice to Anāthapiṇḍika. And Anāthapiṇḍika is known in the suttas as being the layman who was foremost in generosity. So Anāthapiṇḍika was a wealthy businessman who lived in Savatthi, which was where the Buddha lived for much of his life and where most of his teachings were given. And Anāthapiṇḍika was constantly making donations to the monastics, and he donated a large quantity of land just outside of Savatthi, so a large quantity of forested land, which a monastery was built in, which is commonly referred to in the suttas as Anāthapiṇḍika's park or Anāthapiṇḍika's monastery. So in Pali, that's Anāthapiṇḍikasa Ārama, so the monastery of Anāthapiṇḍika. So Anāthapiṇḍika, in addition to being a very generous supporter of the Sangha, he was also a very devoted follower of the Buddha. So on this occasion, as you'll see as we go through the sutta, Anāthapiṇḍika is very sick, so some monks go to him to give him some teachings on his deathbed. So I'll read through the sutta and explain things here and there as we go along. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions. So please feel free to type in questions at any time. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove at Anāthapiṇḍikova's park. On this occasion, the householder Anāthapiṇḍika was sick, in pain, severely ill, as many people are these days. Then Anāthapiṇḍika addressed a certain man. Hey, man. This is actually what it says in Pali. He actually literally says, hey, man. He says, hey, man, go and approach the Blessed One. Venerate him with your head at his feet and address him using my words. Bhante, the householder Anāthapiṇḍika is sick, in pain, severely ill. He venerates the Blessed One with his head at the Blessed One's feet. Then approach Venerable Sariputta. Venerate him with your head at his feet and address him using my words. Bhante, the householder Anāthapiṇḍika is sick, in pain, severely ill. He venerates Venerable Sariputta with his head at Venerable Sariputta's feet. Then say, Bhante, it would be good if Venerable Sariputta came to the householder Anāthapiṇḍika's dwelling out of compassion. So Anāthapiṇḍika was a big fan of Venerable Sariputta, as we see in a few places in the suttas. This comes up. So it's notable that he has this person go to pay respects first to the Buddha, but then to Venerable Sariputta, and to invite Sariputta to come and give some teachings to Venerable Anāthapiṇḍika, to the householder Anāthapiṇḍika. So he invites Venerable Sariputta to come and give some instructions to him. Yes, sir, that man replied to the householder Anāthapiṇḍika. So this person might have been a servant of Anāthapiṇḍika. It's not clear in the suttas, but that is most likely what was going on. So that person went to the Buddha, paid respects to him, sat down to one side, and when he was seated to one side, that man said to the Blessed One, Bhante, the householder Anāthapiṇḍika is sick, in pain, severely ill. He pays homage to the Blessed One with his head at the Blessed One's feet. Then he approached Venerable Sariputta, paid respects to him, and sat down at one side. When he was seated at one side, that man said to Venerable Sariputta, Bhante, the householder Anāthapiṇḍika is sick, in pain, severely ill. He venerates Venerable Sariputta with his head at Venerable Sariputta's feet. He also says, Bhante, it would be good if Venerable Sariputta came to the householder Anāthapiṇḍika's dwelling out of compassion. Venerable Sariputta silently consented. So the man delivers the message, and there's one small point of Pali that I'd like to point out at the end of this paragraph. It says, Venerable Sariputta silently consented. So some other translations that you'll see of this phrase, so adivasesi tunhi bhavena. So adivasesi means to agree to something or to welcome something. Here it has the meaning of agree or consent. Tunhi bhavena. Sometimes you'll see this translated as using silence. So he consented using silence, or he consented with silence. And that's caused a lot of confusion, because then sometimes people think that just being silent automatically means agreeing to something. But that's not the case. So rather, I personally feel that tunhi bhavena here means silently. So it's an adverb usage of the word silence. So he consented silently. So for example, you might nod your head silently, but that's a clear gesture of consent, of agreement, of saying yes. So just being silent doesn't necessarily mean you're agreeing to something. Again, this is a common phrase you'll see in the suttas and translated a bit differently in different places, depending on who's doing the translation. But personally, again, I think there should be silently consented, not consented using silence. Then Venerable Sariputta dressed, took his bowl and robe, and approached the householder Anāthapiṇḍika's dwelling, with Venerable Ananda as his accompanying contemplative. So both Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Ananda went together. When he arrived, he sat on the designated seat. After sitting down, Venerable Sariputta said to the householder Anāthapiṇḍika, "Householder, are you enduring? Are you able to keep going? Are your painful feelings subsiding and not increasing? Is their decrease discernible and not their increase?" In other words, how are you doing? Are you getting better? And Anāthapiṇḍika replies, "Bhante Sariputta, I am not enduring. I am not able to keep going. Severe painful feelings increase for me. They do not decrease. Their increase is discernible, not their decrease. Bhante Sariputta, extreme currents of pain disturb my head, just as if a strong man was cutting open my head with a sharp blade. Bhante Sariputta, I am not enduring. I am not able to keep going. Severe painful feelings increase for me. They do not decrease. Their increase is discernible, not their decrease. Bhante Sariputta, there are extreme feelings of pain in my head, just as if a strong man was crushing my head with a leather vice. Bhante Sariputta, I am not enduring. I am not able to keep going, etc. Extreme currents of pain slice through my belly, just as if a skilled butcher or his apprentice was slicing open my belly with a butcher's knife. Bhante Sariputta, I am not enduring, etc. There is extreme fever in my body, just as if two strong men took a weaker man by his limbs and roasted him over a charcoal pit. In other words, he's having a hard time, lots of pain, and it's getting worse. I find it adorable that even though he's in so much pain, he still takes the time to make these metaphors to describe exactly what his pain feels like. So, and then as if the message was not clearly communicated, he says once again, Bhante Sariputta, I am not enduring. I am not able to keep going. Severe painful feelings increase for me. They do not decrease. Their increase is discernible, not their decrease. In other words, he's implying that he's not only is he not getting better, he's getting worse. And the statement, I am not able to keep going, implies that he thinks he's going to die. He thinks he's not going to survive this illness. So then, Venerable Sariputta replies, therefore, householder, this is how you are to train. I will not cling to the I, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the I. Householder, this is how you are to train. And the same with the other senses. I will not cling to the ear, to the nose, to the tongue, to the body, or to the mind. And my consciousness will not be dependent upon ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind. Householder, this is how you are to train. I will not cling to visible objects, sounds, fragrances, flavors, tangible objects, or mental objects. And my consciousness will not be dependent upon visible objects, sounds, fragrances, flavors, tangible objects, or mental objects. I will not cling to eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. And my consciousness will not be dependent upon ear, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind consciousness. I will not cling to eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, or mind contact. And my consciousness will not be dependent on eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind contact. I will not cling to feelings produced by eye contact, produced by ear contact, by nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, or mind contact. And my consciousness will not be dependent on feelings produced by eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind contact. So I'll start with that, and then we'll move on to the rest of the sutta. So he's starting here by going through the six senses: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The six sense objects: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental phenomena. The six kinds of sense consciousness: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. The six kinds of sense contact: Again, eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, and mind contact. And the feelings produced by each one of those 6. And for every one of these categories, every one of these things, he's saying you should not cling to this. You should have you should not be trying to hold on to it. So this is the practice of continually letting go, continually relinquishing whatever experience there is of sensation, continuously relinquishing our sensory experience moment by moment. So there's awareness of whatever's arising, and there is the willingness to immediately allow it to cease. So this is not clinging. So things are coming and going all the time, and that's not a problem as long as we don't try to hold on to any of it, as long as we don't try to perpetuate any of it, as long as we don't form desire or aversion towards anything that comes and goes. So this is the practice of equanimity, of not latching on to anything that appears. So not latching on to also the experience of seeing. So if you suddenly go blind, can you be okay with that? If you suddenly go deaf, can you be okay with that? If you suddenly lose all body sensation, can you be okay with that? If your mind suddenly goes completely blank, can you be okay with that? And this is particularly relevant because if Anāthapiṇḍika is on his deathbed, then pretty soon he might have all of these exact experiences. As his body starts shutting down and his mind starts to disintegrate, then he's going to lose his 6 senses. So if one has no attachment to your senses, then there's no problem. But if one has attachment to the experience of seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking, then the dissolution and disappearance of eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind is going to be extremely upsetting. So it's necessary to cultivate that willingness to allow things to come to an end, to allow things to cease and change and disappear without the slightest bit of longing, without the slightest bit of grief or loss. The other statement he makes is, my consciousness will not be dependent on these things. In other words, not building our sense of self upon sensory experience, not basing our awareness, not basing our wisdom, not basing our capacity to know and understand on our sensory experiences. So you are not the eye, you are not the nose, you are not the tongue, you are not the body, you are not the mind. Or the ear, I think I left ear out. You are not the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind. You're not any of these things. So there's no value in basing our consciousness, our fundamental sense of awareness, on any of these things. By the way, this is also one sutta where the word consciousness is used in a broader sense than only sensory consciousness. So these days you'll sometimes hear people say that in Buddhism, consciousness only refers to consciousness of the 6 senses, but that's certainly not the case. So for example, here he says, I will not cling to eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. And my consciousness will not be dependent on eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. So that clearly indicates that here consciousness and sense consciousness are being distinguished as 2 separate things. And that there can be such a thing as consciousness, which is not dependent on sense consciousness. Another place where this commonly comes up is in the analysis of paticca samuppada, dependent origination, where again, consciousness appears in the causal chain before the arising of the 6 senses. So there also is a case where vijnana, consciousness, is used to mean a primordial awareness which is not directly connected to one's sensory field, which is not directly connected to any of the six senses. And then there's sensory contact. So sense contact is the experience of having a sensory, some kind of sensory experience. So attachment to the eye is, or clinging to the eye is attachment to having the ability to see. Attachment to sight is attachment to whatever it is you're looking at. So not wanting to lose what you're looking at. Attachment to eye consciousness is attachment to the awareness of a visual world, the experience of I am seeing things. Attachment to eye contact would be attachment to the particular experience of seeing something. So these are all distinctly different aspects of the sensory world, aspects of sensory experience. And the final one is feelings produced by sense contact. So when you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or cognize something, then we place a value judgment on it as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So that's feeling. That's our reactive tendency of liking, disliking, or not caring. So normally when our mind is fairly dull, which is most of the time, then we just blur all of these aspects of sensory experience together into just one consolidated blob. So when we see, we just blur together eye with sight, with eye consciousness, with eye contact, with the feelings produced by eye contact. We just blur all of that together into one muddy blob. But when one's attention is very sharply refined and clarified, then one can pick apart the different components of this. So this is an interesting practice to do, especially if you're on a long meditation retreat. It's hard to get this kind of precision of awareness on a day-to-day basis, but during a meditation retreat, you can get this kind of refined awareness. So when your mind is very sharply refined and attentive, see if you can pick apart the different components of sensory experience as they arise separately. So this is a very interesting practice that can be done. But once again, it only works if your mindfulness and samadhi are already very well developed. So outside of a long meditation retreat, this is not likely to be achievable for most people. Then Venerable Sariputta goes into the next category. He says, therefore, householder, this is how you are to train. I will not cling to the earth element, the water element, the fire element, the air element, the space element, and the consciousness element. And my consciousness will not be dependent on the earth element or the water element, the fire element, the air element, the space element, or the consciousness element. So here, Sariputta is introducing the six elements. So we had a series of meditation practices and teachings on the six elements a little while back. So these six aspects of how we experience the world. So four physical aspects: earth, water, fire, and air. Then the space element and the consciousness element. So this is a way of viewing our experience in terms of categories of experience, categories of how we relate to the world. So we relate to the world in terms of solid, which is earth element, liquid, heat, air or movement, space, and consciousness. These are the six ways that we relate to the world. But that's an artificial distinction that we create. It's not the way things actually are. It's just an artificial way of chopping up the world into digestible pieces. So latching onto any one of the elements, latching onto the experience of solidity or the experience of liquidity, the experience of heat, the experience of motion, the experience of space, even the experience of consciousness, is just attaching to samsara. And attaching to samsara is attaching to dukkha. And it keeps us spinning around in the cycle of birth and death. It keeps us spinning around in the cycle of misery. So, and again, as one approaches one's deathbed and one's body and mind start to disintegrate and break up, then one's ability to discern the 6 elements is going to fall away. Additionally, as one enters into a direct perception of the nibbana dhatu, the asankata dhatu, then the 6 elements also disappear. As is made clear in a number of other suttas, in the asankata dhatu, in the nibbana dhatu, there are no elements. There's no 6 elements. There's no objects. There's nothing whatsoever to be seen or heard or smelled or tasted or touched or thought about. So in order to enter fully into an awareness of the unconditioned, one has to be willing to let go of everything that is conditioned. One has to be willing to let go of every aspect of one's experience. So looking into moment after moment after moment. That's what we need to let go of. That's what we need to release our grip on. To stop trying to grasp at things which we're trying to cling to. Let go of it. Let it change. Let it go. So in Buddhism, we talk a lot about letting go, to the point where for many people it becomes a meaningless buzzword. But it's not a meaningless buzzword. When we talk about letting go, we're talking about this profound willingness to allow whatever we love to change. Profound willingness to open up to the complete disappearance of everything that's familiar to us. Because if we can do that, then the heart becomes completely free. A sense of boundlessness, of spaciousness, of unlimitability opens up in the mind. In fact, an interesting meditation practice is simply to use the phrase, let go. Just repeat that over and over in your mind. Let go, let go, let go, let go. Let go of what? Let go of this. Whatever the mind is currently pointing at, let go of it. Let it disappear, let it change. Don't force it to go away, because that's also another form of holding on. But let it go, let it change, let it disappear. Let it go its own way. You don't need to get involved. Let go, let go, let go. And also ask yourself, what is it that I am unwilling to let go of? What am I holding on to? And when you notice what you're holding on to, recognize that it's constantly changing. There's not anything there that you can hold on to. So then Venerable Sariputta goes into the next category. He says, householder, this is how you are to train. I will not cling to the body, to feelings, to recognition, to mental formations, or to consciousness. And my consciousness will not be dependent on body, feelings, recognition, mental formations, or consciousness. So this also is quite interesting. So this is the 5 khandhas, the 5 components of personal existence. So body, feelings, recognition, mental formations, and consciousness. So body is your physical body. And the other 4 are mental components, components of the mind. So feeling, recognition, mental formations or mental activities, and consciousness. So feeling is Vedana, which is the experience of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Recognition is Sanya, which is the process by which we place a label or a concept on a sensory experience. Sanya also is the perceptual distortion aspect of the mind. It's the activity of rewriting our experience to match our preconceived ideas of what it should be. Mental formations is thoughts and emotions. So the mental activities that we engage in. This is sankhara in Pali. And the last one is vijnana. So again, this is vijnana in the more limited sense of sensory consciousness, which again, here we see this distinction between sensory consciousness as a specific consciousness and a more general primordial awareness. So vijnana as a standalone thing, set apart from vijnana as part of the five khandhas, from the sensory consciousness as one aspect of the four parts of the mind in the list of the five khandhas, the five components. So this is another way that we can practice, is to recognize these five components of our experience and to recognize our attachment and clinging to each one. We desperately try to hold on to the experience of our body. Even if you think you don't like your body, you're still holding on to it, unwilling to allow it to change. We are deeply, absurdly attached to our own bodies. Even if we hate our bodies, we're attached to hating our body. And fundamentally, there's still the belief that it's my body that I am hating. So it's still a form of attachment to body. And the same with the mental components. In fact, even more strongly with the mental components. We're deeply attached to how we feel about things. And we form really strong self-identities. I am the person who likes pizza. I am the person who hates cilantro. Like, these are our rigid, unquestioned self-identities. This is who we think we are. This is who we think defines us. But actually, these are just temporary, impermanent things. They're sankharas. They're conditional phenomena that change depending on conditions. So Ayasoma recently revealed that when she was a little girl, she liked chocolate, which is mind-blowing because these days she hates chocolate. So clearly, the person who hates chocolate is not who she is, just as the person who liked chocolate was not who she was. It's just a sankhara. So the feeling of liking that arose when she ate chocolate as a girl, well, that was not who she was. That was not permanent. That was not stable. And the feeling of disliking chocolate that arises now is also not permanent, not stable, not eternal. Maybe next year she'll suddenly randomly discover that she likes chocolate after all. Who knows? Could happen. She's giving a look of disbelief. But it could happen. It's happened before, it can happen again. And so recognition, the perceptual distortion aspect of the mind, the tendency to rewrite our experience. Well, that's also something that can change over time. An example of this is training one's mind. So Ayasoma recently brought up the example of fonts. How I saw a font and I recognized it as being basically the same as the other font, so I didn't really see any problem with using one font over the other one. But that was because my eye had not been trained to clearly recognize the differences between the fonts. I still can't, by the way. But with the proper training, I probably could learn how to distinguish what makes the fonts different and why a certain brown-clad, shaven-headed person might be particularly attached to a certain font over another one. So one's recognition also can change. And mental formations are obviously changing. Just look at them, chaotic mess one moment after another. And it's always, always, always different. Even when we think it's similar, it's different. So really closely looking at this, what is it that we think we're holding on to? And you realize that what we think we're holding on to is actually different from what we thought we were holding on to a moment ago. And what we think we're holding on to is already vanishing and changing and disappearing. What is it we think we're holding on to? Is there actually anything that we're holding on to? Or is it just the activity of trying to hold on? Really look at this. Examine your mind moment by moment. What is it that I think I'm holding on to? And am I actually holding on to it? Or is it constantly slipping through my fingers? I'm trying to grab a handful of water. There's nothing there. How could you possibly hold on to a handful of water? Then the next one. Householder, this is how you are to train. I will not cling to the dimension of infinite space, the dimension of infinite consciousness, the dimension of nothingness, the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception. And my consciousness will not be dependent on the dimension of infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, or neither perception or non-perception. So this is, for most of us, not particularly relevant, because most of us probably aren't actually experiencing the domains of infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and neither perception or non-perception. But if one does have an experience of these, what's called the formless dimensions, the formless realms, the formless states of mind where there is no body, there's just these experiences of a vast openness in the mind. But no experience of body. So this is experiences that can happen in very deep samadhi, very deep meditation practice, in very strong concentration. There are also experiences which are characteristic of some very high deva realms. So very remote deva realms. And the devas of those worlds, by the way, don't interact with humans at all. There's no record of it in the suttas, because they have no interaction with the physical world. Why would they? It's completely irrelevant to them. So they live extraordinarily long lives in these very rarefied states of mind, but eventually it comes to an end. So this is also relevant for someone on their deathbed, because often when people are on their deathbed, they really desperately want to completely escape the experience of their body, because their body is very unpleasant to be in. So they might set their mind on a formless experience, an experience with no body at all. But that's not a solution to dukkha. That's not an escape from samsara. It's just a particularly unusual corner of samsara, a corner where one has no physical body. But it doesn't solve the problem. You just stay in that experience for a while, and then eventually it comes to an end. And you wind up back somewhere with a physical body. Similarly, the states of concentration, where one can enter into the states of mind, of there being only infinite space, or only infinite consciousness, or there seeming to be nothing at all. Again, these are not a true place of safety. There's no wisdom in those states of mind. They're just temporary experiences which are very peaceful, but which do not address our underlying defilements and delusions. So those also, they're not things we should aspire towards. And if they happen, we should not try to hold on to them or preserve them, because they don't bring us to the end of dukkha. They don't bring true wisdom and understanding. Then he says, householder, this is how you are to train. I will not cling to this world or another world. And my consciousness will not be dependent on this world or another world. So this world means your current life, your current experience, and another world would mean your next life. So here again, it's recognizing there's this world and there's the next world. But either way, it's just another aspect of samsara. It's just another piece of samsara. So I'm not trying to hold on to this life, nor am I trying to get rid of it or reject it. And I'm not craving for the next life, nor am I averse to it, nor am I resisting it. And we recognize I am not this being in this life, and I am not the being that will be in the next life either. So our consciousness, our awareness, our sense of self-awareness is not dependent upon the experience in this life or on the experience that might appear in the next life. So it's recognizing that this unfolding of life after life is just a causal process, which plays itself out according to the choices that we make. But that fundamentally, it's not who we are. It's just a causal process unfolding. It's kind of like if you're making soup. And if you put in carrots, then you'll wind up with carrot soup. But you don't think, I am carrot soup. Nonetheless, it's clearly your choices that led to the appearance of carrot soup. Whereas if you're making potato soup, you put in potatoes and you wind up with potato soup. But it would be absurd to think, I am potato soup. That'd be ridiculous. Yet nonetheless, we can recognize that it was our choices, our decisions, that led to the appearance of potato soup. So in the same way, we make choices, and that leads to the manifestation of a certain life. So a life as a wealthy human or a poor human, a life as a happy deva or as an angry deva, a life in this world or another world. We recognize that it's the product of our choices, but we also see that fundamentally it's not me. It doesn't define me. It's just the manifestation of the effects of past choices. Then Sariputta says, householder, this is how you are to train. I will not cling to anything that is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, attained, sought, pursued, or investigated by the mind. And my consciousness will not be dependent on that. So here, a very broad catch-all statement. So anything whatsoever that one senses or thinks about or pursues with the mind, none of that whatsoever should be clung to, and none of it whatsoever should be the basis for what we call my consciousness, my awareness, my basic sense of knowing. When this was said, the householder Anāthapiṇḍika cried out and burst into tears. Then Venerable Ananda said to the householder Anāthapiṇḍika, householder, are you losing momentum? Householder, are you subsiding? In other words, are you dying? And Anāthapiṇḍika replies, Bhante Ananda, I am not losing momentum and I am not subsiding. However, for a long time, I have visited the teacher. That's the Buddha. For a long time, I have visited the teacher and other well-respected monks, and I have never before heard a Dhamma talk like this. Oh, poor buddy. And Ananda says, householder, Dhamma talks like this are not given to white-clad householders. Dhamma talks like this are given to renunciates. In other words, Ananda is saying, well, we don't normally give teachings like this to lay people. Normally, we give teachings like this only to monastics. Teachings like this are normally just for the monks. So the general assumption was that if somebody was really sincerely interested in devoting themselves to Buddhist practice, devoting themselves to attaining the highest goal of Buddhist practice, then they would naturally take on the lifestyle which is most conducive to that, which is the life of a monastic. So they would go to the monastery, they would live in the monastery, they would take on monastic training and monastic precepts. And they would commit themselves thoroughly to engaging in all of the practices of monastic life. Whereas if somebody was remaining as a householder, again with some exceptions, generally speaking, if someone was remaining as a householder, the belief was, well, then they're not so interested in attaining enlightenment. Maybe they're more interested just in making merit and building up good karma, and maybe they have some aspiration to attain enlightenment in some distant future life, but clearly they're not so interested in doing it this time around. So therefore, there was not really any point in delivering to them the most high and profound teachings. So this is not universally the case. There are a handful of suttas where profound teachings were given to lay people. And there are several accounts of lay people in the suttas who attained stream entry or once returner or non-returner, so attained some degree of awakening. But generally speaking, the deepest and most profound instructions were given to monastics, to people who were really sincerely, completely committed to the deepest practices. So these days, the atmosphere in Buddhism is a little bit different, and there's much more willingness to teach even the most profound teachings to lay practitioners. So sometimes people are a bit surprised by things like this, where it's stated that certain teachings were generally not given to householders and were only given to monastics. But the context has to be understood. That, again, there was the viewpoint that if somebody was really interested in practicing, they would just become a monk. And if they're not really interested in the deepest practices, then there's not really any point in talking to them about the deepest practices. If somebody comes to your house and they're not really interested in learning how to bake bread, then you don't try to teach them how to bake bread. It's kind of a waste of time. But if somebody expresses a genuine, sincere interest, then you can teach them, and it will go productively. It will be beneficial. Anāthapiṇḍika, however, has a rather sharp rejoinder. He says, "Therefore, Bhante Sariputta, give Dhamma talks like this to white-clad householders. Bhante, there are clansmen who have little dust in their eyes, who are wasting away because they do not hear the Dhamma. There will be some who understand the Dhamma." So I find this really adorable. So again, white-clad householders. So at that time, and still to this day in many Buddhist countries, people who are very devoted practitioners, devoted lay practitioners, would wear white, would wear all white. And commonly, when people go to visit the monasteries in Theravada countries, they'll still wear white clothing as again, an outward display of their commitment for at least a day or a few hours or a few minutes. They'll wear white to show their commitment. So white-clad householder. The word translated as clansmen, I don't normally translate it that way. So let me just see what I translated as clansmen. I think I know already, but I just want to check here. Yeah, Kulaputta literally means son of a good family. So I wouldn't translate that as clansmen these days. For one thing, it makes me think of the KKK, which is really not what the Buddha was talking about here. Not what Anāthapiṇḍika was talking about either. So it just means someone who, like someone who's a good person. That's all it really means. So clansman is a bit of an awkward translation. I don't know why I picked that in this case. But yeah, I find it really adorable. He says, there are people who have little dust in their eyes who are wasting away because they do not hear the Dhamma. Just like, oh, okay. We don't want people to waste away from not hearing the Dhamma. That's very sad. Anyway, the sutta continues. Then, after giving this advice to the householder Anāthapiṇḍika, Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Ananda rose from their seats and left. Not long after they left, the householder Anāthapiṇḍika died and reappeared as a Tusita Deva. So the Tusita heaven is one of the more pleasant aspects of the sensual world. So it's a few ranks above the human world. It's not the highest of the sensual worlds, but it's pretty good. Pretty good. Then late in the night, Anāthapiṇḍika, as a young Deva of surpassing beauty, illuminated the entire Jeta's grove and approached the Blessed One. After approaching and venerating the Blessed One, he stood to one side. While he was standing to one side, the young Deva Anāthapiṇḍika spoke to the Blessed One with poetic verses. This is Jeta's grove, frequented by a community of sages, inhabited by the King of Dhamma, producing rapture for me. Activity, knowledge, Dhamma, and virtue, the ultimate livelihood. By means of this, mortals are purified, not by ancestry or wealth, Therefore, a wise person, seeing one's own benefit, should wisely investigate the Dhamma, where one may be purified in this way. A monk who has gone beyond can at best only be the equal of Sariputta in wisdom, virtue, and peacefulness. Once again, he really liked Sariputta. So even after being reborn as a deva, he still remembered his fondness for Sariputta. This is what the young deva Anāthapiṇḍika said. The teacher approved. Then the young deva Anāthapiṇḍika, thinking, the teacher has approved of me, venerated the Blessed One. Having done what was appropriate, he disappeared right there. Then at the end of the night, the Blessed One addressed the monks, and the Buddha reports what happened. When this was said, Venerable Ananda said to the Blessed One, Bhante, that young deva was definitely Anāthapiṇḍika. Bhante, the householder Anāthapiṇḍika, had deep faith in Venerable Sariputta. And the Buddha replies, Excellent, excellent, Ananda. Ananda, you have attained what can be attained by thought. Ananda, that young deva, was Anāthapiṇḍika. This is what the Blessed One said. Satisfied, Venerable Ananda delighted in the Blessed One's speech. So that's the end of this sutta. At this time, if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and type them in, and I'll answer them as best I can.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante, for sharing this excellent teaching. And we have lots of questions.
Oh.
So I don't even need to ask people to ask questions because they are already typed in a lot. And welcome to all the other friends who've joined us in the meanwhile. And Elaine says, I did the lockdown haircut. Took a razor to my head and just left a bit so I cannot be turned away at the neonatal critical care unit. That with white clothes are coming out today. Thank you for inspiring me.
Oh, cute.
Sadhu. Hope everything goes well with your daughter and nephew, grandson. How do you say it in English? Grandchild.
Not nephew, grandchild.
I always get it confused. I think because in Italian we have the same word for both.
For nephew and grandchild?
Yeah, nipote.
Weird. Okay, anyway, please continue.
So, welcome, Joe, from the UK. And Mark and Yanni. Hello, Boone, Jacqueline. And Galaxy from Malaysia, who says, always expecting for Sutta study every day.
Oh, wonderful.
And Bradley says, bonus points for Anāthapiṇḍika's honesty with his pain. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Mark says, in response to not clinging to sense contact, what should I make of the current science that says music and aromatherapy can be helpful for those that are very sick or dying? Or is this only for those highly trained in these teachings?
Well, aromatherapy seems harmless enough to me. I'm a little hesitant on music, though, because music tends to weaken one's samadhi, and you need all the samadhi you can get, especially as you're approaching death. Aromatherapy seems harmless enough. Again, just recognize it as something impermanent, a sensory experience which is constantly coming and going, and that it might have some therapeutic effect, but still we should not be dependent on it. We should not form any attachment or longing towards it. Okay?
I guess there would be a difference between a practitioner and someone who does not know how to cultivate samadhi to begin with. So perhaps these...
Yeah, I mean, if somebody is not a practitioner at all, then they can do whatever they want. And if they want to practice music therapy, who cares?
It's for people who are very sick or dying, aren't they?
Yeah,
on the deathbed.
Yeah, whatever. But if you're a practitioner, I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah.
Okay.
If you're a practitioner, then you want as much peace and quiet as you can so that you can keep your mind stable and sharp as you approach death. You don't want distractions. So there's a cute story. I forget who the monk was, but there's apparently there used to be a practice in Thailand. I don't know if it's still done these days, but there used to be a practice that when someone was dying, then you would go and chant Arahang, Arahang, Arahang in their ear as they're dying. And there was apparently the belief that this would help them attain enlightenment on their deathbed. And so, but then this one very respected forest monk in Thailand, he was like, what are you doing? You're just distracting them. You're not helping one bit. You're just distracting them when they need all the attention they can muster. Anyway, so yeah, if someone's not a practitioner, then whatever, just do whatever to make them comfortable. I mean, they're going to die confused anyway. So at least make them comfortable as that's happening. But if someone's a practitioner, you don't want to do anything that's going to confuse them or distract them or weaken their mindfulness and samadhi at all. Okay? Ayasoma doesn't like this answer. It's so easy to tell. Her facial expression is crystal clear. You want to give a different answer?
It's okay. Let's go to the next one. So Gita says, Bhante, so if we train this practice daily or often, then when we approach the moment of death, we direct our mind to this meditation process. And Bhante, what if one is in a coma? Coma.
Yeah, so if you develop this as a habit of mind, cultivating these practices habitually, then as you approach death, then you'll continue practicing in this way. So you don't need to make a special effort because it will already be the tendency of your mind. And as for coma, well, when you're approaching a coma, then you continue practicing in this way. But also, there's this common misunderstanding that in a coma, you have no mental activity, but that's not necessarily the case. So they've done a number of studies on coma patients, and they found that people in comas often are still quite mentally aware and quite mentally active. It just doesn't manifest outwardly, but internally they're still active. And there's also been a number of cases with advanced monks, including Ajahn Chah, who were in comas, and even while in the coma, they were still able to manifest certain things in the world around them. So being in a coma doesn't necessarily mean that you're totally blanked out, like a deep sleep. There can still be mental activity going on. But yeah, I would also, again, just say, well, if you cultivate this practice habitually, then it will always be there for you, whatever situation you're going into, whether it's coma or death or serious illness or whatever. Okay?
And Mark is asking, also, are you distinguishing consciousness as thoughts as different from awareness?
Can you say that again?
Also, are you distinguishing consciousness as thoughts as different from awareness?
So consciousness is not thoughts. Consciousness is awareness. And as I mentioned a few times during the suttas, there's two ways it's used in the suttas. So one is specific awareness, so awareness of sight, awareness of sound, awareness of hearing, and so on. And the other is more generalized. So the overall foundational awareness, the foundational knowing of being, which is not tied to any specific sensory experience. So those are the two ways that the word vijnana, consciousness, is used in the suttas.
And Gita says, as the sorry, I think you covered that already. Bradley is quoting this beautiful part of the sutta: whatever is not yours, let go of it. And what is not yours? The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind, sight, sounds, consciousness.
Yes. I know the suttas you're referring to. It's really lovely.
Yeah. Delicious sutta. And Sally says, I would like to try the letting go meditation that Bhante taught. May I ask where I can find the sutta related to this kind of methods?
Okay, just do the practices. You don't necessarily need to have a sutta reference for everything. But also, just read the suttas. So, Miss Sally, you're clearly very interested in the suttas, which is great. And you want to find suttas which reference everything, which is great. So read all the suttas, and then you'll have exactly what you're looking for.
And Ramon says, how can we come to terms of not attaching to our loved ones in this life, as overcoming the fear or not being reborn together? Broken heart emoji.
Oh. Well, first off, recognize that every single sentient being has at one point or another been a loved one for you. Every single one, without exception. So there's an interesting series of suttas, it's in the Samyutta Nikaya, where the Buddha says, it is difficult to find a person who has not at some point been your mother, or your father, or your brother, or your sister, or your wife, or your husband, or your daughter, or your son. So at some point, every single person that you meet has at some point been your mother, they've been your father, they've been your brother, they've been your sister, they've been your son, they've been your daughter, they've been your husband, they've been your wife, they've been your friend, they've been your dog, they've been your cat, they've been your Lord, they've been your boss, they've been your coworker, they've been everything at one point or another. So you're never separated from your loved ones. You're always with your loved ones. As long as you're with other people, you're always with your loved ones. And even when you're alone, well, there's nothing to worry about, because as long as you're caught in the cycle of samsara, you'll keep running into your loved ones sooner or later. Whether or not you recognize them is a different story, but you'll keep running into them. So the issue here is not worrying about being separated from your loved ones, but rather worrying about your own inability to recognize your loved ones. So actually, if you cultivate a heart of boundless loving kindness and compassion for all beings, then there's just no problem, because then it'll be easier for you to recognize everyone you encounter as a loved one. Then you'll never be separated from your loved ones, because everyone will be your loved ones. Which is already the case, by the way, we just forget. The problem is not separation, the problem is forgetfulness. So we just need to remind ourselves. Okay, May has a question, go ahead.
I don't understand why Americans always say we're really afraid to dine alone. This is correct, to dine alone is very cold, you have no distraction. I don't understand why they.
So our resident May is saying she doesn't understand why Americans are afraid of dying alone. She says, actually, it seems the best thing is to die alone, because then you have no distractions. And honestly, I don't understand either. Because personally, I actually agree. I think dying alone would probably be a bit better, because then I could just focus on my sati and my samadhi and my vipassana and not be distracted by people wailing and screaming and all the other things people do when their loved ones are dying.
Disclaimer, May is from Burma and born Buddhist. And Bhante has been a monk for now quite some time. He might have had a different perspective several years ago. Maybe. Just for context.
Maybe. Do you want to give the emotional Italian answer to the question?
No, because we have too many questions to go.
Okay.
And Sally says, can we try to change our sanya process based on I will not cling to the recognition? For example, try to label everything as not important, dash not worth clinging to. So hard to reverse, rephrase, sanya, the label, so much concepts that they are very important.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's a very good thing to do. Okay.
And 1 second.
There's actually a really lovely quote from Ajahn Punadhammo. He said, "Nothing is too important to let go of, and nothing is too insignificant to ignore." I think I got that right. Did that make sense?
I got distracted, sorry.
Oh.
I was looking for the questions.
Anyway, go ahead.
So Liz, hello Liz. I wonder if Liz Di Cesare was our friend from Rockaway, our friend from Rockaway.
Yeah, yesterday she said she's from Rockaway.
Oh, then Liz, hello.
Yes.
Oh, great, good to see you. So Liz is saying, good morning and thank you for the teaching. Would you consider the consciousness element time?
No. Okay, next question.
Very Zen answers. Good, because we have lots of them. Sally says, has household or Deva Anāthapiṇḍika attained Arya fruition like Sotapanna? When Deva showed brightly in the monastery, will the other monks saw that Deva? When we chant Deva protect us, included alive Deva now like Anāthapiṇḍika, who once were the disciple of the triple gem?
So I believe elsewhere in the suttas it specified Anāthapiṇḍika was a stream enterer. So I'm pretty sure Anāthapiṇḍika had already attained stream entry. You'd probably know him, eh? Yeah. Yeah. So Anāthapiṇḍika was already a stream enterer. I don't think all of the monks in the monastery saw him because one, it was in the middle of the night, so many of them were probably sleeping. And two, most people can't see devas unless devas make an exceptional effort to be seen. So ordinary humans normally can't see devas unless either they train their mind really well or the deva is really making an effort to be seen. And yes, when you invoke the devas, by all means, you should be invoking devas who are the Buddha's disciples. Those are the best ones. Those are what we call the Dharma protectors, the Dharma protecting devas. By all means, call on them because those are the ones who are most likely to be interested in helping you out. Yeah, so if you want to call on Anāthapiṇḍika as a Dharma protector, I'm certain he would be happy to oblige.
So cool. I actually had not thought about that. That they're currently, the Anāthapiṇḍika is currently in this realm of existence, potentially.
Yeah, still around.
Pretty neat.
Yep.
All right. And Ethan quotes, in olden times, it was said that if someone was mortally ill, one of the next of kin should whisper Buddho, Buddho in their ear. What are they going to do with Buddho? What good is Buddha going to be for them when they're almost on the funeral pyre? Why didn't they learn Buddha when they were young and healthy? Now in the breaths coming fitfully, you go up and say, Mother, Buddha, Buddha, why waste your time? You'll only confuse her. Let her go peacefully.
Yeah, that's the quote I was referring to earlier. Who's the monk who said this? Does he mention who the monk was?
No. Oh, Ajahn Chah. That's what I thought, actually,
okay,
that I believe
okay.
Bhante was referring to above. Yeah, it shows up later.
Okay, great.
Great. This is awesome. Yeah, Ajahn Chah has lots of like incredible discourses on the deathbed that are rad. Dan says, regarding sanya, this is the first time I heard it translated as recognition. This has a different hue to perception. You also talked of the way that perception has the ability to condition what it is we do or don't see. Thanks for changing my perception of sanya.
Great, good.
And Trisha says, do very advanced practitioners practice in sleep? And if so, would this help with samadhi while dying in death? There
are practices which incorporate sleep. It's most thoroughly explained in Tibetan Buddhism. It's commonly called dream yoga or sleep yoga. So if you look up Tibetan Buddhism, dream yoga, or sleep yoga, then you'll find lots of interesting things on those practices. I don't do them myself. I'm currently much more focused on practicing well while I'm awake. I figure the sleep practices will come later on. I'm not working on developing that these days. Yeah, if you look online, you can find lots of information on those practices.
And Joe says, I'm reminded of Thich Nhat Hanh's writing on his mother's death. How best can I remind myself of this infinite connection, Bhante?
Infinite connection? You mean that everyone you encounter used to be your mother?
Probably.
Father, brother, sister, son, daughter, husband, wife, etc. Yeah, just remind yourself. And everyone you encounter, treat them in that way. When you meet someone new, treat them like an old friend. Whenever speaking with or interacting with someone, treat them with the same gentleness and kindness that you would show your beloved parents or your beloved relatives, or I would say your beloved spouse, but you have to be careful there, because if you take that the wrong way, people will get kind of creeped out. But the attitude of caring and affection and consideration that you would have for a long lost loved one, you should treat everyone you meet in that way. And remind yourself, when you meet someone, remind yourself silently, this person used to be my mother. They used to be my sister. They used to be my spouse. They used to be my child. Remind yourself of these things and then treat them that way. Okay.
And Joe also specifies, I envisage or envisage, I don't know how to...
Envisage.
Envisage, oh.
Envisage, that sounds more French.
I improvise my accents. I envisage, but do not expect, dying alone and outside if possible.
May you get your wish.
And Sally says Anāthapiṇḍikovāda will be very busy from today, especially nowadays. Facts. Galaxy says, I think it depends if it will be helpful to die alone, as if we're able to meet up with some others, good Dharma companions at the last stage of our lives. They might guide us. Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, make the resolution. Make the wish. You can also ask, may the Dharma protecting devas help me out as I'm dying. May they watch over me as I'm dying. Yeah, no problem.
And Nora says, everyone having been a loved one at some time, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard.
Oh,
thank you.
Yes.
Okay, and that's all for today. Thank you so much, Bhante, for tirelessly teaching us the Dharma. So he will be back again this evening at 7:30 p.m. For more great Dharma, and back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for more Dharma. We are very grateful. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So see you soon and have a great